231. That's the average number of apps used by many companies. This leads to a lot of context and tab switching that drains employee focus and costs your company. Grammarly can help. Grammarly's AI works in over 500,000 apps and websites, making it easy for your team to write clearly and on brand without disrupting workflow. Join 70,000 teams who save an average of $5,000 per employee per year using Grammarly. Go to grammarly.com/enterprise to learn more.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, "Happy Friday!" Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
Welcome back to another episode of the Girl Stop Playing podcast. It's your favorite homegirl, Coriel, here to encourage you to stop playing with your potential and start working for what you want in life and in love. You already know that I'm bringing you the information and the conversations to help you make the money and get the honey. You can have it all as long as you are willing to work. And today I have a working woman joining us here on Girl Stop Playing. We got my girl Nia Renee. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. I always like to start the conversation by having my guests properly introduce yourself so we can make sure we put some respect on your name.
Period. Also, I'm really excited to be here. So thank you so much. I'm Nia Renee. I am the creator of How to Love a Battered Woman, where I am a relationship coach, motivational speaker, author, model, etc. But I also work to assist and help people define their power and step into their purpose.
So How to Love a Battered Woman, that definitely how we even got here. I think it might have even been Threads where I first came across your content. And I think you were actually talking about like how you were raised. I don't even think you were talking about like a relationship issue, an abusive relationship or anything like that. But when I came over to Instagram, then the How to Love a Battered Woman started to make sense when I started to go through some of your content. So I would love to start with childhood because, I mean, it's really the root of all of the traumas, the drama, the issues, the tears, the things that we find ourselves dealing with later in life. The challenges that we have are a lot of times rooted in childhood-ish that we just have not either faced, recognized, or worked through. So talk a little bit about what your childhood looked like, as a child, but then kind of what you've realized about your childhood as an adult. Because a lot of times we normalize our childhood because that's all we do. But describe it now with your adult kind of perspective.
So what I realize now, like today, as a 31-year-old woman, I realized that my childhood was not normal. And I always felt like my childhood wasn't normal. I always felt like something was wrong. I always felt like something was off. As a child, I just was like, I did what my parents said to do. And I followed whatever they said to do, but I always felt like something was wrong. So I grew up in a really, really abusive home. Like I was in a very chaotic, very not normal household. My mom was my first bully. My mom was someone that really introduced me to an unhealthy lifestyle of how relationships are not supposed to be, but she framed of how they were supposed to be. And that ultimately led me into unhealthy and toxic and abusive relationships into my adulthood. So the adult that I am today, the more healed version of myself today, I am not taking any BS. I'm not people pleasing. I'm not in that same space because I'm owning and acknowledging what has happened to me. And I refuse to be silenced. And that was like one of the things that my mom always used to say to me was that like, you were to be seen and not heard. And we're not doing that over here no more. Like that's not, you'll see me, you're going to hear me and you'll feel me, period. Because my voice is the most powerful thing that I have. And I refuse to let any of my abusers take that away from me.
So did you grow up with only your mom or two-parent household?
It was a two-parent household. Yep.
And I wanted to put a pin in that because a lot of the conversation online is the answer. The secret formula is two parents in the home. And that in and of itself is not just the secret formula. In my humble opinion,
Yeah.
it's two healthy
That
adults
part.
in the home that are creating not only a healthy relationship amongst themselves, but a healthy household, a healthy environment for you to grow up in. I grew up in a two-parent household, and it was not abusive. I wouldn't describe it as abusive, but it was not a marriage or a household that I wanted to duplicate. And so I definitely just wanted to put a pin there that it's not always two people in the house is going to equal, rainbows and fairy tales. But I would love, if you don't mind, for you to share a little bit of what your abuse looked like, because abuse it's a spectrum. It comes in different flavors,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And depending on our abusers, it can look a couple of different ways. But I think the thread that I specifically kind of found you with was talking about some personal hygiene things that you
Mm-hmm.
probably had normalized, that so much of the things that we just know that we know because it's all we know, we don't realize, okay, that's a little weird, or oh, I didn't learn that, or oh, my mama didn't tell me that, until we bump into a woman who does something differently. So can you talk a little bit about those things that were kind of normalized for you that you now know were abusive?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I know the thread that you're talking about. I did not expect like that when I said that thread went crazy. That thread went crazy, and I was not expecting it to get the viewership that it did. But the thread that I threaded basically said that when people say that like, oh, you weren't abused as a child, or like, what do you mean you weren't taught like the essentials? And I broke it down by saying like, well, the only way that I learned how to change my underwear was not because my mother explained to me that I needed to change my underwear. It was because on a Sunday she was doing laundry, and she was folding the laundry, and she only counted 2 pairs of underwear out of the 7 pair of underwear or 6 pair of underwear, depending on when you do the laundry, that you're supposed to have in there. And instead of explaining to me, she beat me. She beat me. And then she just told me next Sunday there better be 7 pair of underwear in there. I didn't learn until I started my period, really. And I started my period when I was in the 8th grade. So about 12 or 13 years old, the importance of hygiene and why you need to change your underwear. And for a long time, I was really embarrassed about that, but it's like, how was I supposed to, like, I changed my underwear out of fear. I didn't change my underwear to understand the purpose of cleanliness and hygiene. I changed it because I was afraid that my mom was going to pop me upside my head because I didn't change my underwear. And that's really like the significant difference in a lot of people. Like, there would be comments on some of the other social media platforms that were like, your parents did the best that you could, or I want to see you as a kid because you probably weren't that easy to deal with, yada yada yada. And two things can be true at once. Multiple things can be true at once. But at the end of the day, like, I had to learn how to be a woman by modeling it off of things that I saw my women friends do. And that includes into my 20s, into my mid 20s, where I see the way women put on hand lotion and the way that they use their perfume, and they always smell so beautiful. And just, I never had that. Like, so it was very interesting because I just didn't have that.
And you didn't even probably realize what you didn't have because you didn't even know it was a thing to have. I
Right.
think for so many people who did grow up in more normal, because what really is normal, right? But in more normal, more
Right.
traditional kind of households where their mothers were talking to them about things and teaching them how to take care of yourself as a girl, how to, transition into womanhood. People who just naturally had those conversations, they can't even fathom your mother not doing this. So if they think about your mom not doing this, it must be your fault. It must have been something that you were
Had to
doing.
have
You
been my
must have
fault.
just been hard to deal with, because why would a mother not do that? And so there's such a layer of guilt that goes along with the guilt and the shame, I guess, come together. But it's like, I'm at fault because my mom decided, to not do this. Or for me, I wouldn't say, I would say there are things like I was a terrible cook for a really long time. Now I've gotten much better now, but there are like a lot of the domestic things, I'll say, the more womanly, girly things that I intentionally avoided or just did not know how to do because I wanted to stay as far away from my mama as I could when I was a little girl. Like me and her didn't get along. And so when
Yeah.
I'm around, she's going to be yelling at me. I'm going to be in trouble.
Mhm.
So I'm not in the kitchen with her learning how to cook. I'm not
Right.
doing the girly mommy things because that just wasn't a natural part of our relationship. So as a 25, 30-year-old adult, someone may look at you and say, well, you should know better than that. You should be able to do X, Y, and Z. But really, how? If the one person who should be in this role and should be intentional about how she's nurturing and caring and educating you is not actually doing that, then you
Mhm.
truly are the victim. Not that you should stay in, as a victim or see yourself as a victim, but you couldn't help those circumstances. So I
No.
think we really have to extend grace, especially online, because threads, the people be with
Social
their
media in general.
social media in general, with the
Yeah.
judgment behind, you just don't know
Mhm.
somebody's story.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
just don't
I
know.
remember, someone like I think I taught like that thread I threaded recently, but I made a video on it like a couple of years ago, I think, and I put it on, the Bookface app, and, I remember some guy commented on it, was like, "Your mama been changing your diapers and your drawers for 5 years, like, you mean to tell me you don't know how to do it after that? Da 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 da," and I'm just like, that's the only reaction I have is like, be so for real. Be so for real. Like, just because she was doing the bare minimum, she still didn't teach it to me. It wasn't repetitive. It wasn't something that, like, I had to have surgery for. I had a hernia in the 8th grade, and I had to have surgery for it. And I remember something was off, something didn't feel right. And so on my groin area, I would look down and I would see this blue little bubble, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right, this looks weird. But I was too afraid to tell my mom. I didn't tell my mom for weeks because I thought I was going to get in trouble because I thought I did something wrong. Wow, this is the first time I'm actually sharing this story. Literally the first time I'm actually sharing the story. um and so, but anyway, it got to a point where it felt uncomfortable and it started to hurt, so I called my mom to the bathroom and I was like, "Mama, like, I need you to look at this." And I believe this wasn't too long after I had my first period. But I showed her and she goes, "Wow, I didn't know you had pubic hair." Well, as a 31-year-old, that's weird to me. And she goes, I didn't know you started growing pubic hair. I didn't know you had hair down there." So again, that goes back to hygiene. So if you didn't know that, then how you're not teaching me how to take care of myself. You're not teaching me what does this even mean? I'm like going into a whole new different phase. My body is changing. I'm going through a whole different phase and you didn't know.
That leads me to wonder what her relationship was like with her mother, because while I do not ever want to interject she did the best that she could, because I don't buy into that theory at all. I do understand, right? Logically, I do know that this started somewhere. And most of the time it didn't just start because our moms woke up one day and said, I want to be a terrible mother and this is just the reality I want to live. Like, that's usually not the case.
Yeah.
For most mothers, their relationship with their mother was strained or challenging or non-existent. So have you, and I'm sure, in doing the work, you've peeled back the layers to really figure that out, but could you pinpoint like some dysfunction or toxicity within her relationship with her mother?
Oh, absolutely. Her and her mother were, I mean, just they were not a model of what a healthy relationship is supposed to be, and it was very toxic, very verbally abusive, and very just it was very unhealthy. I remember there were several times when my mom would have done something to that, like, I don't know the specifics really, but she did something that my grandma didn't like, And this was back in the day where, we had house phones and you could hear when someone's leaving a voicemail. And I could hear there were several times my grandma would call the house phone. My mom wouldn't answer. And then my grandma just rips her a new one, cussing her out, calling her all types of names, everything, because she didn't get her way. And it was several times. I would hear them screaming at each other, yelling at each other, but my mom was still there taking care of her. And I was just like, yeah, if you think that's going to be me, like, we really need to have a real different conversation, because that's not going to be me. Like, we're not going to have that volatile relationship. And that didn't really hit the fan until my parents split. When I was 15, my parents split. And they split because my mom basically set me up to have me kidnapped because I didn't want to go work out with her at my uncle's house. Yeah, yeah, it doesn't make sense. No matter how I
Kidnapped by
explain this
who? I
story,
have several
everybody has to
questions.
say- Yeah, go.
Kidnapped by who? What do we mean?
My uncle.
Okay. Okay, that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But that was the cause for divorce. Did your dad take you with him?
So we stayed at the house. My
Oh.
dad told her she could stay with my brother because I have two half siblings, and my eldest half sibling, I don't know where she is. I don't really care. But my brother was there at the time, and my dad. So this was after the point that I found out that me and my brother didn't share a dad. We were raised to believe that my dad was his dad, and we look like twins too. So it was crazy. But yeah, my dad told her she could stay, and she didn't stay. Like, told her she could stay, told her she could live in the master bedroom. He'll sleep in my room, or we'll figure out sleeping arrangements. She raised her son. He'll raise me until he graduates from high school. And she tells the world to this day that my dad kicked her out, left her and my brother for dead. And I was in the car. On my way, my dad was taking me to a safe location, dropping me off to a safe location with a trusted adult, literally after this event happened, so he could go meet up with her and they can discuss what was happening next. So I was in the car when he was on the phone telling her this. And she tells the world, no, he kicked me out. He left me for dead, yada, 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 playing the victim.
So how was your relationship with your dad how was your relationship with your dad? Let's just start there.
So my relationship with me and my dad, we got really, really, really close. After I got to this place where I was really uncomfortable with the things that was happening with my mom, because a lot of the abuse would happen by my mom. My mom was a teacher, so she was off. Yeah, she was off the same. Everybody gives me the same reaction. She was off during the summertime, and so my dad wasn't. My dad was a probation officer, so a lot of the abuse would take place during the summertime when my dad wasn't home, or when my mom was driving me to school in the morning. So I begged my dad to switch, take me to school, and she could take my brother to school. And one day I just looked at him and I just started asking him questions, because she was going on a smear campaign telling everybody that my dad was gay, he had HIV, that's why she had to get her ovaries removed, like all of this insane stuff. And none of it was true.
This is the reason why the whole mental health conversation needs to be more than a conversation, especially in our community, because all of these people that are a part of these statistics of these mental health issues, they are people with children. They are people with jobs that are important, that are out in the world making decisions. These are people who, if they do not find healing and help, their mental health struggles and issues literally spill over to children, but also communities, depending on the position you may have or the title that you may hold. A teacher.
Yeah. A teacher, where other kids would call her mom. They would tell me how much they love her, that she's the most amazing person in the world. That's when they go to school, that's their safe space. My mother was their mom. And I had to put on this fake front this smile because that's not who I got at home. So the kids that were escaping abusive situations took comfort in an abuser, and they had no idea.
I don't know if that is, and we can talk about narcissism. I feel like narcissism is such an overly used term that I think the definition has gotten watered down and just kind of recreated. But part of what I think, I don't know if it's narcissism or being a sociopath or whatever it is, but to be able to go out in public and have one persona, but then come home and you are like a completely different person to the people who are closest to you. I don't know
Yeah.
what that's called,
That's
but
a
I see
personality
that a
disorder
lot.
for sure.
I see that a lot with mothers, with mothers, I guess, not just mothers and their daughters, but just you go out in the world and you present this person, but then the people closest to you see like this monster, but then they can't ever talk about it because nobody will ever believe them. So you're the crazy person. It must be your fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah.
So how does all of this present itself in abusive relationship?
I mean, so when you're used to chaos and you get launched into another chaotic situation, it feels normal to you. You feel comfortable in it. You're not going to question an environment that you've been around and you've been in your whole entire life. It's been normalized. And so when you get into relationships, especially in your adulthood, when you get into relationships and you have someone that is telling you all the things you wish you would have ever heard, they're love bombing you, and then they flip that switch. And in my mind, I'm like, well, my mom used to do that, so like this is normal. My mom was the same way. Like and like, but when you're in it and you don't know any better, you can't make that correlation. And that's how I went through a few relationships like that. And on my last one, when I left him, I was like, I really need to I need to take a step back. Why am I attracted to people like this? Why am I still attracted to people like this? Like, what is going on? And so I went and I did EMDR. And when I did EMDR for the very first time, one, I wanted to face my issues with men. So my EMDR therapist was a man. And at the root of it, it came back to a lot of behaviors of my mom. I was getting into relationships with the different faces of my mom. And once I was able to figure that out, it's like I cracked the code. I was able to really I cracked the code. Like I was dating several, like whether it was men, whether it was women, whether it was friends, whether it was family, it didn't matter. They were different versions of my mother. And
Wild.
it blew my mind.
It's wild because not that you would never think that your mother could have that impact, because obviously this should be like the number one nurture, provider, cheerleader, all of the things. So of course that person can have an impact, but for it to manifest in like the men that you're choosing because you truly normalize abuse, it just happens to be that your abuser is your mother. But and the daddies get such a bad rap because a lot of times we can say, well, a woman's going to choose a man like her father. You're literally going to choose a lot of times based on your void. So based on either what you are trying to fill or
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, Happy Friday! Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, Happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
Acting what you're accustomed to. So you saying, you were dating different versions of your mom, those men probably weren't even looking for you. Something in you was pulling them to you. Whether it was them or somebody else, until you healed that part of you, you had to have that. That's the only way you knew how to function and operate, was in toxicity and abuse. but instead of your mama, it was your man. And so
Yeah.
many women have not gotten to that place of healing yet, where they have not stopped to ask that question of, wait a minute, what's going
Because
on
it's
here?
normalized. It's normalized
It's normalized.
everywhere you look. You can get on, like, the biggest example, especially if you've been watching the show for the last 12 to 15 years. Love and Hip Hop is a prime example of fight for your man. Like, I'm a ride for my man. Like, da da da. It's a horrible example of what real love is supposed to be like. And so when you see it normalized in Tyler Perry movies, and you see it normalized in a lot of stuff that you see on TV, and then the music in the art that you consume, the music you consume, the things that we consume, it's literally everywhere. If you don't have the ability to trust when your inner self is telling you something's off or something's wrong, then you're never going to be able to discern. You're never going to be able to say, okay, something is off here. I've been a free thinker my whole life, and that's what pissed off all of my abusers, because I've always been like, something's not right here. But when it's in everything that you consume, it's so normalized, you don't stand a chance. You
Or you
literally
start
don't
weighing
stand a
you start
chance.
weighing it. Like, I can accept this because of what it comes along with. Because social media
Yes.
will have you convinced that as long as you are exchanging it for something that you think is worthy, then it doesn't matter if it's abuse, as long as you're getting something out of the equation. So we definitely have to stop.
Treating as transactional, and it can't be.
Exactly. Yep. So
Yeah.
when it comes to how to love a battered woman, I want to know how a battered woman can find love, because so often, especially after multiple abusive or toxic relationships, that wall goes up, your guard goes up, your lack of trust, is really amplified, because now you have all of these examples of why you should not, trust men and how it could play out.
Right.
How did you, and how can other women listening to this find space to even see that there could be a possibility for real love?
You have to take a step back, I think. And oftentimes when survivors of these types of relationships, we want to desperately have love. We want to know what it feels like to have love. We want to know what it feels like to be safe. We want to experience that, and we want to get it as quickly as we can. And we need to be able to take a step back. And once we can take a step back, I tell my clients this all the time. Relationships, a lot of people think that relationships are almost, and dating is about the other person. And it plays a significant role, but it's not the most important part about dating and relationships. The biggest piece in relationships, and I say it's 90-10, 90% of it is yourself. You have to have a really solid relationship with yourself. You have to heal that relationship and repair that relationship with yourself, and so that you can trust yourself, you can trust your mind, you can trust your body when you're having these reactions to the people that are around you. And it's difficult to do that when you're so used to being gaslit 24/7. You start to gaslight yourself. You're unintentionally continuing the cycle of abuse, and you're not even aware of it. You're the most important person in your world. You're the most important person in your life. And not in the way that narcissistic people or narcissists see themselves. It's in the way that I have to live inside my body. I have to live inside my thoughts. I have to live with what I feel and how I feel, and I have to live with the repercussions of the actions that I make and the decisions that I make. Nobody else is going to feel that. No one else is going to. So you have to have a solid relationship with yourself. And that starts with forgiving yourself for the things that you had to do in order to survive, because you didn't know better. You didn't know better then, but you know better now. And you know going forward that you're never going you can never make those decisions again. You can never go back down that same road again. And if you feel like you are, you have to be able to have such a strong relationship with yourself, that other person that's taking you down that path will not be able to tell you otherwise. They will not be able to continue to persuade you to go down that path with them. You'll be able to discern and be like, all right, I gotta go. But that comes with yourself. If you don't know yourself, if you don't know what you want, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what your deal breakers are, if you don't know how to spot red flags, like, what are your non-negotiables in relationships? If you don't know these true things about yourself, how are you going to go out and find that in a person? And then if you do find that in a person, you have to be able to be in a position where if they start to become what you don't want or what you don't need, they will never be able to persuade you that that's where you should stay and that's where you should be. It's a solid relationship with yourself.
That most people, most adults do not have.
Yeah.
And because I think that it truly only comes on your healing journey. And I always say that it's a journey and not a destination, because I don't believe you can be healed. We're just like out here every day. We're trying to not to backslide. And sometimes we be reverting. Okay.
Mhm.
But on that journey is the only time that I think you truly get to that place of awareness, because so many of us have even realized in our adult big ages that we were raised by emotionally immature, emotionally unaware, emotionally unevolved, underdeveloped,
Unavailable.
unavailable grown adults who, if they truly could not give us what they didn't have. So if they don't know how to even identify or put a name to their feelings, how the hell are they going to teach us how to regulate our emotions? Like, how are they going to teach us how to put up
Can't.
boundaries or
And,
speak up for ourselves? It's
and
impossible.
they did it. And it's absolutely impossible. And I think that's also what goes back to the conversation about mental health in our community, because it just doesn't, like, this is the hill that I will forever die on. My parents should have never had children. And I really genuinely feel like my parents had kids because that's what was expected of them to do. You're expected to get married, to have kids, whatever, right? They're just following the status quo. They're following what they were taught. But there's nothing, like, you're just not in a place where you can give another you have to be able to put that human being above yourself, that child above yourself. And my parents couldn't do that. My dad did. I mean, when the phrase is like, my dad did the best that he could, I can acknowledge that his best wasn't good enough, but I can acknowledge that he truly did the best that he could. I can acknowledge that my dad has his own trauma. I can acknowledge that, but my dad still rode really hard for me. I just wish he made different decisions earlier. Like when I started talking to you about the issues that was going on with my mom, when I was in when the conversation first came up in the 8th grade. So, or when we first started getting closer and whatnot, and not when I'm being, now all of a sudden when this huge catastrophic event happens, that's when you decide to part ways. Like, it should have happened years before. So, with my mom, it's a completely different story. There's I will never be able to see her perspective. I will never be able to see it and acknowledge that her perspective of how she went about things exists. She had me. She was mad that she couldn't manipulate and control me the way that she was able to do my siblings. And I'm not saying there's nothing against my siblings being unable to be immune to that. They just didn't have what I had of being able to have, like, trust that intuition and then have another trusted adult that they could speak to about it. And my mom hated me for that. I was treated differently by her because I was living in a house with both of my parents. And that's not my fault that you had 3 kids by 3 different men and expected me, like, I don't understand why I'm being mistreated because of the decisions you made. Like, I will never be able to see my mother's perspective.
I
My dad
think
is
what
a
you
completely different story.
I think what you said was like the mic drop moment, which is, in a nutshell, everybody don't need to be parents.
No,
Our society says not having kids is selfish, but I believe
I'll be selfish.
that it is there is nothing more selfish than bringing a child into a situation that you yourself are not prepared for. Bringing a child into a situation just based on pressure from people that and now it's time to have a baby, or now this is the next thing to check off of the list. That to me is selfish, because you are not taking into consideration the lifespan of this child.
And it's more than that materialistic statement that they love to throw back in our face. Well, I put clothes on your back and food on the table and a roof over your head, but you're legally required to do that. Like, that's literally state and federal requirements so that you don't get arrested for child endangerment, neglect, and abuse. Like, that's literally the bare minimum. We're talking about emotional nourishment. We're talking about emotional development. We're talking about teaching emotional regulation. We're talking about during the most formative time in a child's life, when they're becoming a person and their personality is developing and their brain is learning new things, and you're raising someone and you're not in a healthy space, and now you're trying to raise a child, and now you're abusing that child, and now you're permanently altering the brain chemistry of that child. They're no longer going to be the person that they were destined to be because you were not ready to have kids. And so many people refuse to acknowledge how deep it actually goes, because every decision that was made from the time I was born until I was 18 years old were the same reasons why I made the exact same decisions until I was able to break free from that. And a lot of people refuse to acknowledge that.
So for women who are watching or listening to this right now, who are on their healing journey, but I always like to acknowledge the women who, because we love to talk about therapy, and I think therapy is an amazing resource, but it is not a resource that everybody has the resources for.
Exactly.
So for women who are listening to this and they know that they're triggered right now, right? They can relate to this conversation. They're like, "Ooh, my mom ain't shit either." Like, they're feeling the feels. Are there any resources that you can share that can kind of put them on the path or on their journey, whether it's a book that changed your life, a podcast that you tune into, any resource that you may have, or even one that you've created that will help women that are truly ready to heal?
Yeah, I mean, I have my whole my whole brand is essentially how to help not even just women, people in general. I mean, I'm not exclusive or cater to a specific demographic, though it just comes to be that way. My brand name, How to Live a Battered Woman, is because I can only speak from a woman's perspective. Like, I can only speak from my perspective. But yeah, I have resources. I mean, I have a book that I wrote called Letters to You. I self-published it. You can find it on Amazon, and it's just a collection of letters, journal entries, and experiences that I've gone through over the last like 10 to 12 years of my life. I mean, I even found journal entries that I had from when I was in my senior year in high school, and they're all in this book. They're letters to my abusers. They're letters and journal entries about things that I was just truly dealing with in life. And I think it helps other people to get the perspective of like, okay, this is where she was, this is how she felt, and this is what she was dealing with then, but there, look at where she is now. She's in a better place. Like, hope it's possible to get to a better place. So I mean, I think I will always recommend, my own personal stuff, but I think I think if you find something that truly feels good to you, and it's calling you in your own experiences, go with that. Don't let, and I say don't, I say the let part loosely, since it's not the right word to use, but don't let anyone tell you any differently. If you feel like you have a favorite content creator, or you have a favorite, someone, YouTuber or podcaster, author that talks about these things, and it feels good to you, and it's nourishing you and it's nurturing you, don't let anyone persuade you differently. Don't let them change you off that course, because that's what you're supposed to be consuming. That's what you're supposed to be taking in. And allow yourself the opportunity to actually feel and acknowledge your experiences.
Speaking of, really quick, I want to get into EMDR.
Yes.
Because I have honestly had conversations on the podcast, had an appointment, went to the appointment, it did not work out. The lady got sick and it just didn't work out. And I'm like, God, is this a sign that I'm not meant to do this? Because I was so intrigued. I really want to do it. So talk a little bit about what that is, what your experience was like, and who, if anybody, you would recommend it for.
Yeah, so it's EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, I believe. I think I always kind of mess that one up, but that sounds right. It's sounding good. And it helps you target a specific traumatic event, and it helps you process it out of your body, and it takes the pain level, the trauma level from a 10, and you want to get it down as low as you can, try to get it to a 1, even a 0. And that's what I'm learning with my new psychotherapist. So I did EMDR for 2 years after my last relationship, and I was able to really, really work through a lot of the trauma that I endured as a kid. And now I'm just starting to dive back into it a little bit more and focus on some of my medical trauma. But a lot of the themes in my life tend to lead back to my childhood. So I still have some things that I need to work through. But I think it's incredible. EMDR is incredible. When I did it for the very first time, I had nightmares for like 6 years every single night, just nightmares. And once I did EMDR, that was the first night I slept through the night without having a nightmare. And it really, 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 really changed my life, honestly. It is hard work. Sometimes you might leave a session feeling like your whole body is hurting and you're exhausted. Sometimes I left feeling like I just got into a fight, like because your body is you're reliving that, but you're really working on getting it out, releasing it out of your body. So especially if you have severe trauma, I have CPTSD. So if you have, I mean, trauma in general, but like if you have severe trauma and you have things that you really want to get to the root of, and it's a process, but it's incredibly worth it. It's so worth it.
That has been the feedback that I've gotten from everybody. So I'm like, man, okay, maybe I'll give it another try and go on back. Maybe I won't take it as a sign. I'll take this conversation as a sign.
Yeah, take
I
this
need
as your
to.
sign, and find with therapy, one size does not fit all. You have to find the situation, the right therapist for you, and you have to find the right therapist for you, and it's going to take a while to even get started of even getting to the EMDR part itself, because talk about you have to talk about it. You have to tell the therapist what happened and what was going on, and who you are, and it's a whole process, and it takes time to lead up to even getting to the the portion of the EMDR itself. And there's three different pieces. It's like there's either a buzzers that buzz back and forth, headphones that it makes a noise and it dings back and forth, or there's a light bar and it bounces back and forth. And sometimes you have to choose what works for you. Sometimes I do the buzzer, sometimes I do the headphones, sometimes I do the light bar, sometimes I do all three. It just depends on. And my therapist actually was so surprised when I told her I'd done all three before. She's like, I've never heard of anybody doing that. And she's like, that's a lot of work. And I was like, yeah, it was up on one of the days where I just really wasn't allowing it to come up and come out. It was blocked and I struggled with it. And I told my therapist at the time, I was like, you might have to pull out all the stops, because sometimes I block. And yeah, I had to do it, but it was definitely an incredible experience, which is why I'm doing it again.
Interesting. So anybody out there, use this as your confirmation. Okay. Let me know. Send me a DM. Let me know if you try it, what your
Me
experience
too.
is like. I am all for us exploring these quote unquote our alternative wellness modalities, these things that will truly give us our power back, will truly allow us to heal so that we can go out and live out these purpose driven lives that we are all praying to do. So I appreciate you for spending some time with us, for being so open and honest, and just allowing this to be a safe space for not only yourself, but for other women who have not felt seen before. So for people who want to stay connected, please let them know where they can find you online and how they can stay connected on social media.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for having me. Honestly, when you reached out, I was like, oh my goodness. So amazing experience. I really enjoyed being here. So thank you for having me to
Yay.
tell my story. You guys can find me at How to Love a Battered Woman, all one long thing, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then you can, if you can't remember all that, you can find me at www.howtoloveabatteredwoman.com, which is my website. If you're interested in doing relationship coaching with me, you can find my rates and everything that I do there. And yeah, it's currently being revamped too, so look out for a refresh coming up soon, and then you'll be able to see the events that I'm doing. And yeah, How to Love a Battered Woman everywhere.
I want to end this episode with actually a quote that I saw on your Instagram page that I think just really gives flowers to the women who are on this journey, but feel like, okay, am I even getting anywhere? And you posted that the inner work a lot of times goes unnoticed and unrecognized. And so for any woman out there who don't nobody see it but you, don't nobody feel it but you, don't nobody know that it's going on, or that you are crying yourself to sleep at night, you are looking in that mirror doing that shadow work, don't nobody else know the work that you are doing underground, I just want to encourage you, give you some flowers over the airwaves through your computer screen to know that I see you, that we see you, that there are women out there that in spirit, we are with you. We are rocking with you. We are working alongside of you because, baby, don't nobody got to figure it out. So give yourself grace. I want to give you your flowers, and I appreciate you for joining me. Make sure you share this episode with a friend, subscribe, and I'll catch you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
So if you enjoyed that episode, I'm willing to bet you are absolutely going to get your entire life when you log on to everybodylied.com. Y'all, I just launched my brand new blog, which is for women like me who are stepping into the newness of life. Okay. Your girl got engaged, got pregnant, got married, and became a mom all in less than a year. And life came at me fast. As life was life, and I realized that a lot of the things that I had been led to believe were a lie. Survey says that was a lie. And so I am sharing all of my lessons learned and what I have discovered to be the truth, along with some resources on my new blog, everybodylied.com. Come on over if you are a woman who is experiencing the newness of life. I'll see you there.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, Happy Friday! Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, Happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.